God was moving, toward a more progressive. He's moving people out of slavery. It's a little bit better than the rest of the ancient Near East.
And half the problem is, and it's still the problem today, your average Christians don't read the Bible.
Exactly.
They don't. They listen to their preachers. They listen to other people.
It would be moral for God to command someone to kill a baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a new guest. I don't think anyone has ever met on my channel specifically. Skylar Fiction is the name on YouTube. Welcome to Myth Vision, man.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today, Derek. This is definitely a new thing being here in person and doing one of these videos, especially with the legend here beside me.
Well, look, you and Joshua Bowen, for those who don't know, a Syriologist, you probably already know, are sidekicks. You guys have been doing videos for a long time. You've seen really the whole reason this video I want to record. You've seen apologetics evolve within the past decade to 15 years, let's just say 10 years, just to be safe in memory. And I kind of wanted to ask you, you're kind of a hard knock. I've been there and seen it happen. You guys are eyewitnesses as this thing has continued. What you've noticed just in your decade of engaging with apologetics, what kind of observations have you made as a skeptic who has been engaging and watching them this long? What's been happening? The reason I asked too, just to add, look at how they're just bashing new atheists, right? Oh, new atheist, dead, dying movement. What's apologetics if not a coping mechanism that constantly evolves to try and save your text, your particular faith and position? So if you guys don't mind, you want to start us off and tell us what you notice, and it's a subjective kind of thing, wherever you want to go with it.
No, it's a fantastic question. It's really interesting because I'm kind of thinking about it from like the whole perspective, right? From being kind of the person arguing more agnostic atheist positions versus evangelical Christian apologists, and trying to think of really both sides have changed in the way they've done argumentation. Typically, in the original, it was more evidential based arguments, trying to prove the Bible's true, trying to prove that Jesus died on the cross. And oftentimes for the atheist non-believer, what they tended to focus on was the moral issues, right? If the person that was Christian was focusing on how the Bible is the true word of God and historical and not allegory, well, then the atheist is going to focus on the moral issues, like the slavery or the violence or any of these things from the Old Testament. But what I found is that kind of got a little tiring for a lot of apologists and Christians, because it's not an easy argument to have to defend your God, telling people to own slaves, telling people to commit violent actions against, their fellow man. So they wanted to kind of put the atheist, I think, in the hot seat, right? And the way they did that was moving to more presuppositionalism, right? A way of not having to actually argue the Bible, but just make them feel like they're making an intellectual argument. But really, when you get to the details, it's not quite as strong.
So technically, you would say, and Josh, we talked about this earlier, you've been scripted. I've been scripted. I imagine you've seen a million scripts with your engagement with apologists. Jay Dyer got me in a conversation and tried to script me. Who else? I've never engaged Darth. I don't even want to talk to that guy. I seriously have zero interest in, after I've seen how he talks to people. Because in reality, I imagine you're not in front of me, dude. Do that with me in front of you. You know what I'm saying? Like that's my alpha male past coming out going, yeah, you're lucky there's a microphone between us kind of thing. Like you're not going to talk to me like you talk to whoever in your life. So you see a shift from evidentialism, meaning, for those who don't know, like, I'm going to prove through archaeology, or I'm going to prove through, we found a bone of Caiaphas in an ossuary, therefore Jesus. We found a pilot stone, therefore Jesus resurrected. Or there was a guy, there was a pool. These kinds of things to explain to me where reason comes from without using reason. I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like word games, it seems like. Word games that let you sound smart and win in a word salad I call mental masturbation.
Yeah.
They call philosophy, but even philosophers don't think this is real philosophy. like real philosophy, like Alex Malpass and stuff. So you notice that transition, but there's still a thread of evidentialists that still exists simultaneously, and they don't like the presuppers, and the presuppers don't like death.
But the beauty is with precept is you can learn the argument and learn how to defeat it pretty easily by simply focusing on what they're focusing on. Their whole idea is that they have, but it actually, this kind of works for me. Like I'm a God believer. I'm not actually an atheist. I'm a pantheist Christian. And for me, I can account and do the same thing they're doing. I'll be like, well, listen, you just point into some kind of foundation that allows rationality and reason and logic. Well, I'll just do the same thing, right? Now we're to the point where now you're making it different already, because now you're going to say it's the God of the Bible, right? Now you got to prove that. You can't just say this is your presupposition, which I think, honestly, this is something that's really bothered me over the years, is it's not a presupposition to conclude that the Bible is true, right? That's a conclusion. You read it, you took in the information, you said based on the evidence, maybe not even based on the evidence, maybe based on your feelings, right? But you came to a conclusion, you're like, this is true. That's not a presupposition like the idea that I can be logical or I exist or an axiom or something like that, right? These are specific axioms that are considered usually presuppositions. And getting to like this point, well, what they want to do is they want to say it's equal playing ground, right? It's not fair that you get to be the judge of our God. So, basically we want equal footing, but it's not equal footing.
Yeah.
What is this?
Again, like you and I have talked about, Josh, I'm willing to grant the theistic deity just for the sake, because I can't prove something like the foundational explanations they're expecting me to do, or in a sufficient manner, ever persuasive to them. I'm no expert, number one. But if I just grant the deity and get outside of their game, and then, oh, see, we already proved how he accepts there's a God. Look, I don't know if they think that we are worried about whether or not there's a deity, even if we're not convinced at the moment there is. Like, the God thing isn't it.
No.
Your God, specifically that you have to this text, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, if there is a God, I very much doubt he gives a shit about what we're doing in terms of that, or they, or whatever it is, gives a shit about that, is my point. So I'm willing in those kind of discussions, and if I ever encountering it, just to grant it. Because what's the point of me like constantly refusing or trying to play word games? Just grant it and then go, okay, can we get to Bible now?
Yeah.
Are you ready for Bible?
And that's, I think, the more interesting thing to me, because obviously, like, this is going to surprise you that I say this, Skylar, that I'm not a philosopher. It's not my feel, Have you ever heard me say that before?
Nice to meet.
But this is the one thing when we were talking before the recording about like how apologetics has developed over time. The thing that kind of came to mind for me was thinking about how, Skylar and I, for those of you that don't know, Skylar and I used to like co-host this show together. And we got to the point, man, we were recording like 4 or 5 times a week there for a while. And, one of the things that I noticed was that, they used to make these arguments like, there's no slavery, right? There is no slavery in the Old Testament. Yes. When Skylar bring it up, there's no slavery. But then after some time and after we would bring out, all right, here, let's look at this text and let's look at that text, one of two things would happen. Either they would go the route that like Gavin Nortland has gone, when they would say that, okay, well, yes, sure, there is slavery. Yep. And it's the bad kind of slavery. Yep. We agree. But God was moving, toward a more progressive. He's moving people out of slavery. It's a little bit better than the rest of the ancient Near East, whatever. Like this more progressive.
It was never the goal. Right.
That's one direction that they've gone. But the other more terrifying direction that they go, I gave a paper at ASOR, this one of our conferences, a couple years ago. And believe it or not, I don't know if I ever told you this. In my introduction, I played the video of that kid, or that like 20-something-year-old guy.
Dude.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, slavery.
So
Wow.
That was his response. Oh yeah. I mean, I know that. Well, it was something darker we should get into, but
Well, it was rough. It was rough. So Skylar, one of the things that Skylar had this great tactic is he would just walk people through their line of reasoning. And if X, then Y must be true. If Y is true, then Z must be. Those probably aren't letters that fly. Yeah, but whatever.
it's more ABC.
Sorry. If P, then Q. So, um, and so this guy came on and Skylar said, so what makes something right or wrong under your moral system? And he said, whatever God commands is moral. And Skylar said, so it would be moral for God to command someone to kill a baby. And this kid pauses for a second. Again, I say kid, he was like probably late 20s.
Yeah, it's more in there.
He says, yeah, it would be more than moral. Yeah, I would do it if God commanded me to do it. Yeah,
Volunteered it before we even asked.
And Skylar says, you would kill a baby if God commanded? He said, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, like you could see our faces and you actually went, wow. Okay. Because it's
Yeah.
the biting the bullet response. It's always like, oh my God. I'd be interested to hear your take on that.
No.
Because you got to experience it a lot more than I did.
No, I think you're 100. It is the biting the bullet response, which is usually what Calvinism do. That's Calvinism. Yeah, it's like the bullet. And they go worse. There's like God playing the bullet, right? That's the way Calvinists do. No, you're right. And that is kind of a big difference. We're talking about the idea over the years. It was before, like people would, oh yeah, slavery's awful, or doing something like that would be, and they'd try to do everything to say it wasn't in the Bible. And half the problem is, and it's still the problem today, your average Christians don't read the Bible.
Exactly.
They don't. They listen to their preachers. They listen to other people. They listen to
Apologists. Yeah.
their person that they're listening to on YouTube. Probably more YouTube people than even their pastors. That's the sad part.
Sure.
At least your pastor might have some kind of educations or something, right? But no, yeah. Now we're going to YouTube philosophers or YouTube apologists who know a little bit about the Bible and just sound really funny and they look pretty, and that works, you know. Anyways. Yes. And then, but there was a point where it changed, right? Because there was a point when I was doing my channel, and I'm not going to lie, initially, like anything else, right? It's really prevalent now. There was clickbait. It put like a quote like, oh, the Christian says this. Christians support slavery. Look at they defend it. You know, we did stuff like that. Yeah. But it got to a point where it was like, yeah, but so what? What kind of morality do you have? Right? What about you, atheist?
Right.
Right. And I have to over and over be like, oh, I'm not an atheist. But, here's the thing is like, you don't just get to, and this is, I'll tell this over and over again, whenever there's an argument between a Christian, an atheist, something, if a Christian just claims objective morals exist and says, I'm going to hold you to the standard. And if you aren't able to tell me a standard, you have no morality, they don't either. Right? They can't demonstrate it. They can't show you it. It's like saying I have $1 million in the bank of me. I'm like, where's your money? Yeah, right? You got money? I got $1 million. Then we'll show it. And can't show you the $1 million in the bank. Right. So,
But I presuppose it.
yeah, I presuppose it. But once again, though, too, and I will say this is where we're in this middle part, right? Right before now, modern day, right now, is problem too is atheists get kind of bad with their argument. Right, let's be real. The ones that used to like attack the Bible, we kind of left that. They weren't really doing it.
If I may jump in here, I got my bank. Sorry. And no, this is important though that you're pointing out. When I got into this, I was a theist. Shifting, as I told you last night, Josh, when we went into my kind of deconversion as I got clean off drugs, I became more of a pantheist, more like God got bigger, but the control that it had on my mental faculty and the harm that it had through the ideology dissipated. Like God was a good idea in my mind at this time. So when I shifted from a God belief into a not God belief, nothing changed in terms of my behavior, or even I wasn't hurting myself with the God belief or the idea of God. It was the harmful, very honed in control type cultic mentality that I got from the Bible and Christianity in the way that I understood it. So I say all that to say, when I became Myth Vision, I was interested in these different, not very popular ideas, but they're esoteric and mystical at first. And then I started recognizing there's this hole that's going on between full-blown atheist kind of the Hitchens and the Dawkins, and they have their own agenda and their way of doing it, and that's fine. But I like the whole like the Bible's immoral. That works for many people. It never worked for me.
Hmm.
I accepted in a way like a Christian to go, "Who are you, oh man?" to answer back to God. I had a Calvinistic mindset. So the idea that God could do what he wanted with his creation, I had kind of tried to swallow that pill. So you bringing in a moral argument, who do you think you are, was fine for me in my mind. I say that to say, Myth Vision honed in a certain particular, I feel, um, argument, a creative way in actually engaging the literary and mythic fabric of the texts in a way that is unlike the Dawkins and the Hitchens and the kind of like slap you in the face, like this. It was much more like, okay, first of all, Mark, it's clear Matthew used Mark here. Why did Matthew change the wording of Mark? And why is it that this myth actually looks like that myth there and acts like it, talks like it? I mean, and why is it these scholars actually see that this borrowed from there? It almost seems like that's the genetic antecedent. What do you do as a Christian when someone actually is looking and reading your work? The same thing I imagine early Christians did when Celsus or Celsus was critiquing them. You had other people who bitched about Christianity. They never were a threat, but when a systematic pen to paper argument against the Gospels by Celsus was made, he says as much in it. He says, I read and studied and know their Gospels. And I'm about to tell you, like, he goes in and explains all the problems with the Christian cult by really analyzing in his philosophy at the time, which was Platonist. He was a Platonist. He was misidentified as a Epicurean by Origen. Origen didn't even recognize till halfway through the work, and you see that. Scholars have pointed out. But point is, notice I'm down into the weeds. I'm not doing this whole, don't get me wrong, we do it on Myth Vision, but it is not my primary thing to just go, genocide? Like, it doesn't work for Islam, and they're happy to go on crusades. If anything, they actually found ways to say Allah was behind the sword in why we were able to conquer. That doesn't make them not Muslim. So how do we get them without a direct, like, the same way these guys do? Because I did not like Christopher Hitchens. I did not like Richard Dawkins. They were too abrasive. They were too annoying to me. And I just would skip them in the debates and go to the Christian side and listen to their arguments against them sometimes as a Christian. So I say all that to say, like, Myth Vision decided, hey, that doesn't work. But what can work is, why does Samson and Hercules have so much in common? And why don't you believe that Hercules really did these things, but you believe Samson? It's the simple things like that that made me start to lose the literal historical, this is what happened, and start going, these are great stories.
Yeah.
Before you touch on this guy, so I think something that is kind of important is that because I definitely understand what you're saying, this idea that you don't want to listen to, I've learned this lesson so many times, when you want to change people's ideas or you want them to move over your side, you don't treat them like crap, right? You don't abuse them, you don't mock them, you don't make fun of them. And it's easy to do in an online community because sometimes your audience will rear on and stuff like that. But I will say there could be some nuance to this, because something that I learned to do was when it came to moral arguments, instead of like, because it was, we get that, hey, you're just arguing your opinion because I was a moral subjectivist. So I didn't want to make that argument. I was like, well, this is dumb, right? They're going to say you're a moral subjectivist. Let's not do that. So what I did do, though, was allow them to say what they believe out loud, right? And once you say something out loud, it becomes more real to you, right? Because you can't hide your feelings when you're saying it out loud, right? You see it. You see the defensiveness, right? You see when apologists get put in a corner, and we don't have to, you don't have to logic. I mean, you are logic, you put them in a corner, but you don't have to tell them in the corner. They feel it. They know by their response. So sometimes when you're forced to be like, so you're telling me that a woman could be bought and sold as property in the Old Testament and kept for life, that's moral. Just tell me that's moral under your religion. You can tell me that that's your God. But if you do that, now I'm going to ask a follow-up question. So are you saying God's nature is the morality, or are you saying what God does or tells you to do? Right. Because then if it's his nature, then it's almost like if you're saying God's a truth teller, but then your God's telling people to lie or is lying, right? How could a God who can't lie lie. Like, he's a truth teller. He's the opposite. So when you look at stories and you're like, hey, your God's telling people to violently commit actions against human beings, which he cares and loves, like, that's a contradiction. So, like, when you have children, if you really truly love and care for your children, you're not going to do atrocious things to them. It might make mistakes, right? But that's nature and won't let you do it. Yeah.
Your point, as I was a Calvinist, and I'd love to get Josh's take on this, but when I was a Calvinist and I was like going beyond the typical, I used to say I was a 7-pointer instead of a 5-pointer because there were certain aspects that I felt like this two wills of God that Calvinists had made God schizophrenic. I just said it was one will, and that everything that happens, all the evil and all the good, was all his will. Everything was his will, but he gave prescriptive wills like don't do this, but then you only get narratives once in a while that indicate, and he hardened Pharaoh's heart so that he wouldn't. So what God really wanted is what actually happens. Anyway, my point is there was this giant pill that I had to swallow, and that was that I loved people more than God. The people that God doesn't love, I loved them more than God. It never fit. It kept coming up. Every time I tried to swallow it, it kept coming up, and I'd be like, how can I love more than love itself, and God is love? How can I actually love these people that are probably going to burn in all eternity according to my idea? I could never swallow it and keep that pill down for me. I couldn't, because I think, as you probably would agree, most people are better than their religion.
And I think that sort of leads in my thought on this is that there isn't a one size fits all counter apologetic. And when I think about, I'm so glad that there are people that like to do philosophy, because I sure as shit don't. I mean, like, if I had to do philosophy, well, it would just go very poorly. And the reality is that I have a very specific role here in this online community. And I think that my very specific role is akin to like a fact checker. Right? I go into spaces. I'm the good cop. I'm the nice guy. I always need a Skylar Fiction in a debate with me, because like I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, that's a really interesting point that you're making there. Yeah, let's find all the common ground that we have. And Skylar's going to be like, oh my God, Josh, just stop. No,
I don't have the patience. So now I lose the patience. What happened?
But that means that we need people really that cover all of these bases. So we need people that can have that skill, that rhetorical skill, to be able to move somebody in a debate, to get them to a point like you do, Skylar, where they end up going, well, yeah, I mean, I guess it must be moral if women don't consent to have sex with their captive, or I guess that's okay. It must be moral, right? There must be some reason that's okay. I can't get them there. Part of the reason is that as I start to get them there, I feel bad for them, and I give them this way out where they don't have to say it. But so we need people that can get them there. I think we need people that can say, just think for a second about how this intertextuality, leads you to conclude that it sure seems like there's the connection between annihilation, Genesis 1, or whatever. And I think all of these things come as sort of a shotgun effect, right? Where you can be very precise with people, but a lot of times they're able to move out of the way of one bullet or another.
Well, they always will, I think. I think they always will, no matter what you bring, they're going to find something, some way, even at the own embarrassment of their own moral just compass. I mean, say, well, yeah, if slavery's okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yep. Women. Yep. Well, if God said it, there's some who are willing to do that, and there's others who realize, I think, deep down, and they know it's not ethically right to do these things. So then they'll find other twists and turns. And no matter what you do, even with me being trying to be precise with textual this and myth that and comparison this, they always find a way. There's just always going to be a way. And I think the best we could do is just continue to bring education, continue to bring ideas, and to challenge the bad, But I feel like as someone who identifies as the atheist, right? Um, I feel like we need to do a better job for anyone who says they're an atheist of not shooting other non-atheists who are on the same boat that we're on when the other boat is the slave trade. Okay. And we're on the boat that's saying no to this idea over here that's bad. All of us can sing Kumbaya. And I'm trying to create a community that isn't so, oh, you think there's a God? You fucking idiot.
Yeah.
It's like, hold on, dude. Why are we making that our enemy or making us versus them when there's a much larger bubble, I think, of people that encompass all sorts of isms that aren't, our particular ism, and yet goes, we're on the same page on this, right? That's just wrong. And there's no reason to be this dogmatic or even cause these kind of harms. That is what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
And I haven't done the best job at doing that, but I'm trying to do that rather than like some circles of atheists, I think, are like drawing that hard line in the sand. And I wish we didn't do that to ourselves personally. Anyway, that's my level.
I would say that, something, because I was never an atheist, but I always played the role of a hard atheist right on my channel in a sense. Because I did argue against any kind of religion pretty much as hard as any atheist ever would.
Well, I mean, you were a believer in Raptor Jesus.
And could she be under his claws? Yeah. But the thing was, okay. My position now has obviously become more nuanced. It's weird. I've actually argued against religion so many years I became more spiritual. I don't know how that works. But as a Christian pantheist, as someone who looks at what Jesus taught and what he was saying a lot differently than the fundamentalist or evangelical churches, right? I find that way more interesting to have discussions with.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Check out how modern Christians don't even quote Jesus half the time. You never hear them talking about the Sermon on the Mount. They never talk about how you treat other people, right? You'll hear all about Paul. You'll hear all about Romans over and over again, right? We'll focus on Old Testament, even though that really isn't applicable to most of their beliefs now, right? So I think when you get into a mode of you're like, hey, you have a belief, right, in original sin, which is I think one of the biggest problems, right, is you have this idea that you're born broken, disgusting, worthy of wrath by God, right? But you have a savior. But all you got to do is believe he died for you, right? Now, the thing is, though, when you start reading the New Testament, if you actually read it and you read what Jesus said, he's not talking about dying for your sins.
Right.
He's talking about the way, which is how you live, right? Which I think, and if you can start talking to Christians like I do, and I start like, hey, why do you think you require Jesus to die in order for sins to be forgiven? Like, what do you think the real point is? You think that's really what this is all about? You're born broken. You need some savior 2,000 later, thousands of years later, in order to wash some kind of sin you think you have in you. Like, it starts to kind of be like, and when you get them say, "Oh, well, yeah, I guess," like, I don't know. When you get into those kind of topics, it's much more interesting than the classic, does God exist? And does God not exist? Well, no one's walking home happy.
Yeah.
In those situations.
Look, Skylar, love you, man. Thank you for joining us on this. There's much more I could say, but we will never end. So, Dr. Bowen, you have a course on Sumerian, Hebrew. We have MVP courses, 2 of them with you. Go in the description, subscribe to Skylar Fiction, check out the courses with Dr. Joshua Bowen, and we appreciate it. Thank you.